Is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of After Impact. I am your host, Tom Bilyeu, and I am here with Agent Smith.
Mr. Bilyeu.
What's up, my man?
How's it going?
Good.
You've had a long week.
Hellified gangster late. It has been a crazy week. I have been up till 1 a.m. twice this week. Dude, I am oftentimes waking up at 1 a.m. It has been madness.
It's like a Freaky Friday inside out week.
It's an inside out week. You are absolutely correct.
Awesome.
Yes, but I'm happy to be here.
As we're diving in, I just want to quickly welcome everyone, and I have a question for you since this is After Impact. I want to know, have you watched the episode with Mastin Kipp? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments right now. We want to hear your thoughts. How many people have watched the episode or listened to it on the podcast, whatever you prefer? Hopefully a lot of you, so that you have tons of questions to ask, because we want to dive into it here on After Impact.
Nice. And just to acknowledge that you learned something new and you've put it into immediate action, and I respect that about you.
Got it.
Nicely done.
Got to do it. Cool. So yeah, this week we went to Vid Summit.
We did.
And that was a lot of fun.
It was amazing.
Learned a lot.
Amazing. And I love learning. It was just a reminder for me of my absolute obsession with usable knowledge.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I love that too.
You and me
I think
both.
we clicked on the same presentations. We were like, this one.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And the guy that you want to bring in, I think that could be amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm super excited.
The other thing I liked about VidCon was meeting there were so many creators. Sorry, I said VidCon, Vid Summit, rather.
Yes. Ooh. You know what? I had VidCon so in my head.
Yeah.
When one of the speakers went up, I thought, if I made that mistake, oh God, I'd be so embarrassed.
It's a slightly competitive event, but it was so entrepreneurial, and just to see, it was just such a clear reminder. You had all these creators and talked to a lot of people who just, I have my job, and then I started a food blog, then I started making videos, and then I quit my job and started doing that full time. Or I created this channel because I'm really passionate about this hobby. And seeing that there are no more barriers to entry. It's crazy. And you can just do whatever you want.
Dude, so my friend and I, Steve Young, God, that would be weird if he was watching.
The quarterback.
We used to film ourselves all the time. Like, my dad would bring home this camcorder that he could borrow from his office. I don't even know why they let people do that. But anyway, he could do that. And so whenever he brought it home, we would go film something. When I think like what that looks like today, like we would film ourselves going to the grocery store, and like we would do dumb stuff. He did this thing he called gnarly bites, which is like this is like back in 90, probably 91, 92.
Yeah.
And he would do these things he called gnarly bites, where he'd be walking at normal speed and then just fall on his face in like the most like cataclysmic way possible.
Yeah.
And we would do that in like the middle of a grocery store and film it, right? Mm-hmm. Now that's like a thing. Yeah. And I know that like if YouTube existed, like we would have been like, oh man, we got to try this. But hearing some of these guys talk, they're so disciplined about building their channel.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like this tremendous reminder that I had this impulse to do fun and funny stuff. I was always the guy behind the camera, let the record reflect. But I didn't have the discipline to figure it out. Like hearing the Scherer brothers talk. You weren't there for the Scherer brothers.
Yeah.
Oh God, it was so interesting. I don't want to derail too far. We need to dive into Mastin Kipp because he's absolutely phenomenal. But just to sum that all up, that they really have the discipline to learn. And so they had done their channel for like 4 or 5 months, and they were just like, we're not getting the traction. We need to step back, research, and figure this out. And I thought, man, if I had that clarity when I was, 20, it's just nuts.
Super inspiring, a lot of knowledge. So any creators out there, encourage you, check out Vid Summit, check out Daryl Eves, the organizer of Vid Summit, and all of his amazing content. Lot to learn. So let's dive into the After Impact episode. This is the show where we unpack the impact of this week's episode with Mastin Kipp. If you don't know who he is a functional life coach, a lover of science and spirituality. He is a speaker, an author, and his book is called Claim Your Power. Really fascinating episode.
Very.
It was cool to see you guys dive in because I could see there were a lot of parallels in the way that you think and some of the ideas expressed. I want to start off with the big one, and that was really the episode title as well, about bringing science and spirituality together. So I guess my question for you is, do you think that advances in science will bring them closer together, or will it start to explain some ideas that have been around for thousands and thousands of years?
Agent Smith, I don't know. So I had a very weird experience this week, which you and I had a lot of fun talking about earlier. I went to church for the first time in decades. And I am not religious. Like, when I say I'm not religious, I mean I am aggressively not religious.
Yes.
And being there, so there's a preacher, I don't know a better word for it. He's a pastor, a preacher, or whatever you want to call him, here in Los Angeles. I guess he lives in Seattle. He has a mega church, so I'm told, in Seattle. And I'm actually interested to get this guy on the show, which is how I ended up there. So I'm friends. Like, I never know where to classify those sort of early relationships. I have a burgeoning relationship with his agent, really interesting guy named Dean Schneider. And he said, you've got to come see this guy. His name is Judah. And he has this church called Church Home here in LA. And I was like, oh man, like, going to a church. He's like, no, you need to check this guy out. He's very special. So I go, and he is a cross between a stand-up comic and a legit, like, Southern preacher, was what he made me think of, because he's so energetic, so good with the crowd, and just a deeply thoughtful guy about how do we make spirituality, religion, all of it accessible. And so the whole time he's talking about, hey, it doesn't matter like whether you believe what I believe, like, I just want you to feel at home here, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
But he's very much himself, talks about religion. And so that part didn't resonate with me. But like the way that he's trying to be inclusive, the way that he is so entertaining, there's no better word. He's entertaining. So whether you agree with what he's saying or not is totally irrelevant. He is deeply entertaining. But seeing the way that people responded to him, seeing the way that he feels, believes, and approaches the world, I thought, dude, this is like it. There is a certain person. And so the whole time I'm sitting in the crowd, let me finish that statement. There's a certain person who really, really experiences on a visceral level religion. Yeah. And I mean all the trappings of religion. I mean, as different from spirituality. I will say that I am spiritual. He is deeply religious. And seeing that, there was so much energy. And I thought, this is really fascinating. And it is important to remember that, A, I'm having a very different experience than a lot of people here in this church. And they are moved in a very religious and spiritual way, which was really, really interesting. I don't know that there's ever a moment where there's enough science in the world to bring the two together. They are fundamentally different experiences. And so I think that there's an amazing sense of like, people who are deeply spiritual can connect with people who are deeply religious. And I love that. I love anything that makes people feel more connected to people who don't think like they think. And that was probably the most beautiful thing that I took away from that whole experience was, here I am. I'm not resonating in the same way that other people in the audience are, but I'm resonating. Like I found this guy really, really interesting. And I loved his message of like inclusion and wanting people to feel a sense of home. And I get that same vibe with Mastin, where it's like he can talk science, or he can talk religion, or he can talk spirituality, or he can be woo-woo, or he can be really grounded. And he has this way of like bringing it all together. So to really put a fine point on your question, if you had asked me that a week ago before I went to this church service, I would have said, yeah, I think they come together. And then being there, I realized, I hope, this is actually fascinating. This is me projecting what I want to be true more than necessarily what I've meditated on and think is actually true. I want to be true that there's a coming, that science bridges the gap and brings people together under a bigger umbrella, and that as we uncover more of these truths which are measurable and verifiable, that people have to open their dogma, which is the thing that scares me, but they have to open their dogma to include some of these like very hard to get around truths. So I hope that that's a contribution that science makes. I feel like that's the angle that Mastin Kipp is coming from, is that, look, I'm looking at them both, and I can't deny that I have these very spiritual woo-woo experiences. And he talked about that had a near-death experience when he was young, and I wanted to punch myself in the mouth for not following up on that. Part of the reason I didn't is I always try to give him space to talk, and then a lot of times they'll go to like another place and they end, and then I want to follow up on the thing that they ended on, but I'm very, very sad that I didn't ask him a follow-up question on that. And then he said one of his friends' fathers passed away right in front of him. And he said those like were like quake. He didn't use the word quake, but those were like quake moments for him that have echoed from a spiritual perspective throughout his life. And so he has these hardcore scientist parents, and then he's had these deeply spiritual moments, and his whole life is about sort of rectifying or bringing those things together and really understanding both of them. And so I do hope that science helps people develop a broader viewpoint that allows them to be more inclusive. But that experience that I had this past Wednesday made me think there's not a necessary meeting of these, because they're divergent experiences, much like whatever he went through with his own near-death experience and watching somebody else pass, that he just nothing else in his life explains.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what I loved about Mastin is that he knows that there are these two sort of big things, science and religion, that are real to big segments of the population that mean something to each, and that there are truths in each. But then his whole thing is like, how do we take those truths from each of those segments and bring them into something that's practical at the individual level to help you live your life better? Like, that's his whole thing with functional life coaching. And one example of that, which I thought he really had just a great way of saying it, was we pursue external goals to hit an internal emotional target. I was like, whoa.
Yep.
That's awesome. So I want to get your thoughts on that. Like,
truer words never said. That's exactly what I'm driving at when I say the game that you're playing isn't success, it's not money, it's neurochemistry. You're trying to create an emotional state in yourself. And that's it. Like, that's the game.
Yeah.
Nature has built in this neurochemical cascade of all kinds. I mean, there's an untold number of different emotional states, some of which we read as pleasurable, some of which we read as deeply painful. And that's at the end of the day, like, that's all that matters. And so now we could really derail into like, where does brain augmentation go? What's the role of memories? And for anybody else that's deeply fascinated by movies like Total Recall, dude, all that exists is this moment, but this moment is entirely defined by your past. Even your projections of the future are tied to your past. And there's a thought exercise, and I don't know how to put words around this, but I've talked about this before, where if I'm really getting stuck in an emotion or a fear or whatever, I will say to myself, imagine that right now, right this second, in mid-thought, you have just been inserted into the matrix. And everything that you think prior to this very second is fake. It's just a memory that's been implanted in your brain. How would that change my behavior? Because it would dramatically change my behavior. And the way in which it would change my behavior is I would decide what to believe from my past. I would just decide. And I would say, okay, they're all fake anyway. So now which ones serve me and which ones don't?
Yeah.
And that is, I get it. It's a thought exercise. I don't think that's actually real. I'm just saying, like, it's so powerful to realize you can decide which of those events in your past you're going to allow to paint the color of your present and your future. So when Mastin talks about, like, understand that I see highly successful people all the time and they're deeply miserable. That really, that thing, like, when you set that goal, what you were trying to do is create an internal state. Once you understand that, once you understand the game is internal, then at least you're playing the right game. And I think this is why people get so confused with success. To his point about internal targets, you look at somebody that has the success that you think you want because you think that you will feel about yourself the way that you feel about them, and you won't. Yeah. And that they're totally unrelated. Yeah, that's... God, you want to talk about something I wish I could just give people, like, a visceral understanding of that, so that they would, and that doesn't mean that they'll stop chasing money or stop chasing success. It just means that they'll actually understand how to correlate and how to create a causative relationship between their emotions and the things that they get from their pursuits.
Yeah, it's super powerful. I want to dive into something that you just said, but before I do that, I want to again encourage the audience on YouTube and Facebook Live. First, thank you for showing up and being part of this, but this is about you too. We want you to be in the conversation, so please ask questions. Hopefully they're related to the episode or something that we're talking about here. Let's get involved in the conversation.
And by the way, I don't know that we've ever said this. We pretty much avoid taking questions in after impact if it's not about the topics that we're discussing.
It's true.
So for anybody asking questions, by the way, that have nothing to do with this episode, submit those to the AMA that we do normally on Friday. We're a little bit out of order this week because of everything. This has just been a super bizarre week, as you mentioned in the opening. But yeah, we want to answer those questions, just not during an after impact.
Yeah. Well, we have a question right here we can dive into. It's from Beau Montier. Kipp talked about using the angsty emotions as a signal to dive into yourself and figure out what caused them, that they are symptoms of some sort of emotional wounding. He says, I've got some stuff I feel like I need to dig into, but I'm a little scared of the damage I might find. How would you begin approaching something like that?
That's really interesting. So yeah, I'll answer with what Mastin said in the episode, which is do what scares you until it doesn't scare you anymore. And fear is one of those things I so agree with him on. And the way I've always thought of it is fear highlights stakes. It's high stakes. Now, because I'm someone that wants to play in a world stage and I want to do something big and have huge impact, I really use that as a compass, which is something that Mastin talks a lot about in his book and a lot of his talks, using fear as a compass. And by that, he means, he doesn't use the word stakes, but basically that it's pointing to something important.
Yeah.
It's pointing either to the trauma that this person is talking about or, and I actually probably in Mastin's language, that's all it's pointing to. Like there's something that you have uncleared is the word that he uses.
Yeah.
There's something uncleared in your life that is like the nail that he talks about. You stepped on the nail, you've hit yourself with, lidocaine or whatever he says to numb the pain, but you haven't actually removed the nail and gone through the healing process. So that really is it. It is important, and to do that work, you just have to go towards that. You have to rush towards whatever it is that's scaring you, because this isn't how I experience the world. Whatever part of the brain that shuts off painful experiences from the past, that buries it or whatever, I don't have that. So for me, and I actually think this has helped me. So first of all, I always think that it's my fault. And second, it's just hyper clear the stupid shit that I did that led to that. So, but looking at that, facing that, and learning to have compassion for yourself, not judge yourself, not expect perfection, that has been just tremendously beneficial for me emotionally to get past things that have either happened to me or that I've done or whatever.
Yeah.
So not knowing what you're going to uncover, I guess, is a little outside of my personal experience, but you're going to have to do that. Facing it, recognizing that you're in control, recognizing that let's say that they were 100% victimized, because I know what a lot of people really struggle with is they were abused in some way, physically, emotionally, sexually, whatever the abuse was. And so obviously it's not your fault that you were victimized, but that you've let that person continue to victimize you emotionally, mentally, that's a choice.
Right.
And that's awesome. Now you recognize it. Okay, cool. I've been doing that. Now I can do the work of getting past that. I think that's really, really, really important. So it's about the damage that he's talking about identifying is essentially finding the nail and pulling it out. That is step one. Until you're willing to face that, until you're willing to do that and just charge headlong into, okay, this is what happened, and this has been my responsibility going forward. So own that, find that, only in as much, not so you feel badly about it, in that, okay, cool, yes, I have failed to pull the nail out, but now that I'm aware of that, I'm going to do that. I think that's super critical. Move towards the fear, figure that out, Understand that whatever you find, even if it is that you did something horrific, that it's not about staying in that place, beating yourself up. It's about recognizing it and moving past it, and recognizing that you can become anybody you want. So like, even if you turn inward and objectively the whole world would say, you're a fucking dirtbag, like, you don't have to be a dirtbag from that moment forward, right? That is so freeing to me. Like, whatever it is that you look back and see, you can change. You can't change the past. Like, that's done. It's gone. So continuing to deny that the past is what it is only loses more time. And then once you identify, if you're not happy with what you see, that you can make a change.
That's awesome. I want to dive into this a little bit more regarding emotions, because I know you've talked a lot about not letting emotions sort of control your action, or not letting emotions control your life. And you have worked very hard. You said when things used to upset you in a work environment, for instance, like dialing that back to where it's not even registering on your face anymore. So how do you both do that, which I think is super powerful, but also address the emotions? Like Mastin said, like, you need to pay attention to these.
That is super powerful. So here's the process that I go through, which, by the way, so that thing you want me to write, I've struggled with it because I didn't really know what you needed. Now I know it's protocols. You need my protocols. Like, cool. What are the processes? So that's a code word for me, protocols. Remind me of that.
Got it.
So here's the protocol.
And not that I wanted you to write, the community wanted you to write.
Very true.
That's what they asked.
Perfect. So community, thank you very much. It isn't that I use mantras, it's that I have protocols.
Yeah.
Behavioral protocols, which will answer your question. So the behavioral protocol that I go through is whatever, like, when you're kicking some strong emotion up, that is wiring. Like, you have wired yourself now to have that neurochemical response to that situation. And anytime that I have a neurochemical response that isn't serving me. So if I'm getting wound up about something, 99 times out of 100, that's not very effective. Now, there are times where it is effective and you need to be pissed off, and that's the thing that's going to give you the energy. But it really just, it's pretty fucking rare. So when I have something that's kicking up this level of aggression, then I'm going to say, okay, one, right now, I don't want to respond to that. I don't want it to cross my face. And I'm thinking about practicing. So when something's really winding me up, like, part of what allows me to de-escalate the emotion is this is a chance to practice. This is a chance to practice de-escalating that emotion. And knowing that, oh, this is like, I'm not performing in the way that I want emotionally, right? And I'll get to that, like how I ended up there and what I do to back out of that in a second. But so I realized in that moment, okay, I haven't yet done the work so that I don't feel this in this circumstance. So I'm feeling it right now. That feeling is very real, but I don't want it to cross my face because it's disadvantageous from a relationship perspective, from a getting what I want perspective, moving forward. So I can't, like, freak out. Nobody responds well to that. I'm going to be embarrassed by it later. So let's just not go through the process. Let's really fucking chill. Use this moment to practice, like, not letting the emotion continue to escalate. Because that's how it feels for me. Emotions, like, they trigger oftentimes really hard. But then if I give in, they just get worse and worse and worse. And it's like more momentum, more anger, more frustration. So I want to instantly, through the protocol of practice, to remind myself I'm just practicing, and what I'm practicing is de-escalating, not letting it reach my face, not letting it be in my tone of voice, not letting it be in my posture, all of that. So I'm literally, part of my mind then immediately becomes allocated to that, the physiology of what I'm going through, and doing exactly the reverse. So when something winds you up, you want to hold more attention, you want to furrow the brow, you want to, at least I do, I want to square myself to the person, I want to tilt my chin down, I want to furrow my brow, I want to make that face that I know fucking intimidates the shit out of people. And so I then do the opposite, and I, like, relax my shoulders, I release the tension, I put my neutral, like, goofy face on. Like, I'm trying to do, from a physiological perspective, all the things that I can do. I'll slow my vocal patterns down because I find that feeds into my intensity. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but if we, like, right before we roll, I talk way slower than I talk once we go live. And that's a very conscious choice because it revs up my mentality. So in a moment like that, I know if I start talking fast, if I let myself do that, that just feeds that intensity. And so I'll start slowing myself down. I'll start lowering my voice, slowing my cadence. So I'm trying to build into the physicality because of that, like, that loop that people can get in. And I'll do the exact opposite if I need intensity. I'll furrow my brow. I'll bring the tension into my body, all of those things. And then that starts to amp me up. It's just like laughing out loud. Hard to be pissed off and laugh out loud at the same time. That's a physiological thing that I've used to great advantage. Okay, so those are the things in that moment that I'm doing to like practice to de-escalate. At some point later in the day, I'm going to ruminate on why is the wiring this way? Like, why am I in this state? Why does that thing really wind me up? And this is something where for all my talk about like, I don't mind being alone and all of that, I'm so grateful for my wife because she really, really helps me process this stuff. And so I'll talk to her like, fuck, I don't know why. Like, this is where I'm at. I don't know why it's pissing me off, but let me like externalize this, and because I process verbally. So let me like talk through this. And she gives awesome feedback. And if she notices a pattern, like she'll throw it out. Fuck yeah, you know what? You're actually right. Oh my God. Like that is where this is coming from. But then just identifying it isn't enough. You have to really begin to unwind it, which that de-escalation followed by ruminating and talking about is the unwiring process. It's not really even so much the unwiring. You're wiring a new process. So I use the frustration or whatever as a trigger, and habit loop triggers are a big thing for me, part of my protocol. So the frustration, instead of being the thing that feeds a reaction, what it does is it feeds as a trigger into a habit loop of relaxation. So that the gunshot impulse, that instantaneous frustration literally triggers the, hey, right? Like nothing but chilling me. Right. So when you can get into those, you begin to create a new wiring, which is that thing now begins to trigger a chill effect through repetition. Yeah. So, and that's slowly how you wire a new response. And then also if there's like some lingering emotional thing, like I know when one thing that really winds me up, and my poor wife suffers the brunt of this. So anybody out there watching that wants to build something incredible big, like, and if you're looking at me as like an example of, oh man, I just wish that I could be like Tom, like that would be amazing and build something huge. Understand, I am in a constant state of near panic. I feel like I'm in a free fall all the time. And what I just have one overriding belief that is so fucking powerful that it always keeps me from freaking out and allows me to move forward. And that is, I believe to the core of my being, I can figure anything out. I may need to go talk to experts. I may have to read a lot of books. It may take an inordinate amount of time, but I can figure anything out. So I don't place the judgment on myself that I have to already know it. So because of that, I know that I have to create all this momentum, that I have to keep moving forward. Like that's a big thing. And so even though like part of my brain is screaming like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing, I just know, keep going, give yourself the time to learn, put it out there. It is astonishing when you tell enough people what you're doing that they slowly like start being able to help you. It's fucking crazy. But you first have to be the one to dream big and to say, I'm doing it. And my wife in that, I find, this is one of my like trigger things, if she like just wants clarification, I take it as she doesn't believe, because I need other people to like be with me, because I can't fight my own internal battle and have to fight the external battle as well. I need someone somewhere has to believe this shit is gonna work. And so when my wife is like, but what do you mean? But what about this? I literally have to remind myself, she's actually asking only because she doesn't know. Like, this isn't a sign that she's defecting and doesn't believe.
Sounds familiar.
Right? So
with me.
100%. Like, this is my process. It's like...
It's not that I don't believe. It's like, but how? Like, what is it? Because high conscientious.
And yes. Yeah. And this has like been a really important recent realization of why I get frustrated. So going in and going, oh, it's because like... I'm already fighting my own insecurities when other people are I perceive it as heaping doubt on me. Then it's like, okay, fine, heap all the fucking doubt you want, but I'm gonna fight, right? So then it brings out the only way that I know how to not succumb to, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm afraid as anybody else, is I slip into the 20%. Now fuck it, like, great. I have a mechanism to deal with this. I'm not going to crumble. You're not going to be able to make me slow down or second guess myself. But the way that I'm going to battle it is with aggression. And so then it brings out aggression, and everybody else is like, what the fuck is going on? Because you don't mean it from a doubting Thomas place. You're just literally like, oh, I just want to understand this. Yeah. But I'm like fucking ready. You know, like I come out swinging. So doing the work of like processing that and finding that root cause is really beneficial for me, for sure. Because once I know what's going on, I can take different paths.
That's super key, because you've talked about emotions a lot and not letting them get to you and to sabotage the moment, right? But the second part, which is saving it until later to then process it. And this goes into what Mastin talks about in the episode, which is there are 3 steps to emotional fitness. There's emotional awareness, which is just saying, I have emotions, they're present, I'm not going to repress them. Emotional intelligence, which is figuring out what are those emotions and how to identify them. Is it fear, anxiety, anger, whatever? And then emotional fitness, which is training yourself on how to respond to each of those things, which I don't want to derail too much on those right now. I just wanted to make that connection because we have a couple of questions that I want to dive into here from the audience. First off, a couple shout outs from Tammy from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, Canada.
That's a real place.
That's a real place. That's so Canadian.
Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. That's amazing. I'm going to need a t-shirt from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
Yeah, what's up, Tammy?
Put that on my order list. That's incredible.
We also have Shuhas Bhagath from India.
Nice.
These are all people on YouTube. And Rachel JC from Algeria.
Wow. I love how international.
I know, it's so cool.
Berserk.
It's really cool. Here's a question on Facebook from Danbro.
Danbro Fitness, what's up, dude?
Kipp talks about doing things until it doesn't scare you anymore, which is what you just mentioned. What if fear is holding you back so much you can't step up? How would you start digging into the issue?
That's identity. So literally, even as you were reading the words of the question, I was angry with myself. Like, you just can't ever not step up. You can't allow that in yourself, man. Yeah. Like, you've got to face that fucking panic. You've got to punish yourself relentlessly for those times that you fail. Look, I have failed more than most, but I punish myself to make sure that I don't keep doing that. And I recognize that whatever failure that I just had that I'm punishing myself for, it is not a permanent state. I'm not punishing myself so that I will stay there and feel bad and diminish myself. I'm punishing myself for the exact amount of punishment that it pushes me forward, so that I'm not okay with doing that. I'm not okay in those situations. In fact, you witnessed a very minor example of this. So you can't imagine how much I hate like going into a restaurant and being like, hey man, is it cool? Like if my wife, because Lisa can't eat restaurant food right now. Like we're doing a whole thing, and it makes me beyond uncomfortable when somebody's like, hey, I'm so sorry, but we don't allow people to eat food. Outside food, right. Correct, yeah. And I was like literally to the point where Lisa was like, okay, like calm down. But I was like, dude, charge me whatever you need to, find the most expensive thing on the menu. But like, that's not what I'm feeling inside. What I'm feeling inside is, oh man, I don't want to bug this guy. I'm so sorry. But the thing that's like, that I have punished myself for failing my wife on so many times is like, I let that social discomfort stop me from getting my wife, the most important person in my life, getting her what she needs, right? So that's but one of a bazillion examples of where in my past I failed me. I was not proud of the way that I handled it. My wife had made something clear that she wanted or needed, and I didn't deliver on it. And those are things like, that sucks as a husband who prides himself on like being there for his wife, protecting his wife, and then you fail your wife, which I have done way too many times to even enumerate, but it drives my behavior, right? So that I get better, so that now, like, even my wife in that situation, I don't think is thinking about how uncomfortable I am. She's just going like, fuck, you're going so hard and pushing so far. Now she's getting uncomfortable because the level to which, like, I wasn't going to back off until I got what I thought she wanted. Now, I didn't realize what she really wanted at that moment was for me not to fuss, which that gets hard to like know exactly what moment. So you just, hey, as soon as she said, okay, I backed off. But it's like you literally, Dan bro, you have to train yourself. Like, you can't accept that behavior. You've got to push yourself and force yourself to do things that make you uncomfortable. But it all comes from identity. To be the husband that I want to be in moments like that, I have to fucking step up. I have to drive all the way, leave no stone unturned, like keep pushing, driving forward. And yeah, you have to, like, but that comes from shaping your identity, and it takes time.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And that's something that Mastin also talked about, which is finding the trigger point that is going to be so inspiring and intoxicating to you that will allow you to overcome that fear. And he gave the example, I think, of someone he was working with that was trying to get through this emotional trauma she had suffered in the past. And when she realized that that emotional trauma was holding her back from going to the next level to provide for her family, which was the ultimate thing that she cared about, then she just immediately dove in. So
100%.
Super interesting. I want to take a moment to pause and remind everyone and tell them about our contest that we have going on.
Is today the last day?
Today is the final day.
Oh, kids, don't let this moment pass you by.
This is a big contest, guys. We are giving away a flight from anywhere in the world to Los Angeles to hang out with Tom all day and the rest of the team, plus accommodations. So this is a big giveaway.
And so we'll first tell them what they have to do.
I will. At first, I wanted to hype the prize, but
Nice.
Here's what you got to do. This is easy. All you have to do is reach out to your friends and family who should already be watching and subscribing to Impact Theory. But if they aren't, reach out to them and say, hey, there's this show. It's awesome. You got to check it out. Please go and subscribe.
On YouTube.
We're going to drop a link in the comments. There's a video that we created, which is Tom welcoming your friends and family to the Impact Theory community. Send them the link, have them subscribe, and then the last thing they have to do in order to know that you entered so that we can see your entry is to drop your name or your handle or something into the comments of YouTube.
Correct. And the more people that do that, the more entries your name has into the hat, essentially, that we'll be drawing out of. So if you get one person to do it, you have one chance to win. If you get 100 people to do it, you have 100 chances to win. So the more people you get to do it, the better. And the crazy thing is that we set a goal to hit 115,000. Now, we set the goal to hit it by October 1st, which we failed miserably on.
2 weeks late.
But this contest was what was meant to drive us there. You had the foresight to make the contest go for 3 weeks. And it's crazy. The contest ends today. We set this goal 3 weeks, or the date 3 weeks ago. We are going to hit it to the fucking day.
Yeah.
That is so weird. It makes me wish that we had like set a more aggressive goal or something, because it's like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
To the day. It's madness.
I know. I wish we would have started the contest earlier, but here we are. Move past the failures, learn from them, and let's go. So anyway, today is the last day. You have until midnight. Get your entries in. Share this content, please. It would help us immensely. We're trying to grow our YouTube channel. All right, let's go back to some of your questions and comments on Facebook Live. Here's a question from Johan Lucena. How can you put in a practical way what you learned from Kipp? Please choose your favorite lesson and put it in practicality instead of only words. So just get super practical.
So, yeah, the honest answer is what we already talked about, which is take the nail out of your foot. Like, that is researching him, that was the most powerful thing that he talked about, and is really the foundation of his entire book. And by the way, his book is going to do a better job of making this practical than anything that I could do. So check that out. But it goes like this. So identify the wound. Like, what is causing the behavior? Go fix that. And a lot of times it's going to be emotional work of removing your own stigmatization of the trauma, which is usually the nail, right? It's your obsession, you're beating yourself up, or whatever it is, whatever you're doing consistently about that thing. And you have to acknowledge it, let it go, forgive yourself, show self-compassion, forgive. Like, if it was done to you, forgive that person, move past it. Like, you've got to close the chapter on that by removing the the nail. It's just a perfect example, metaphor. So I'll stick with that. You got to remove the nail, and then you've got to go through the healing process. So whether that's engaging a therapist, whether that's using something like Mastin Kipp's book, which is full of like all these questions and answers and actions and all of that, to go through that emotional healing process. That is the key. But you have to get rid of the thing that continues to occupy your thoughts.
Nice. Cool. I want to switch directions here and talk about the hero's journey. So it's super important to Mastin's teachings and the way he thinks. How does it fit into, if you could just help explain for the audience, how does it fit into everything that he's doing around like improving yourself? And
well, so this is really interesting, and that is the thing probably that I responded to most with Mastin is, so impact theory is about the hero's journey's ability to create emotion around the change that every human has to go through to take control of their own life and become capable of something great. I call it getting out of the matrix, right?
yeah.
In Joseph Campbell's language and Mastin Kipp's language, it's going on the hero's journey. And so the hero's journey is broken into 4 parts, and Mastin Kipp's book is broken into the same 4 parts. I don't remember them by name, but in A Hero with 1,000 Faces, he talks about that. Joseph Campbell talks about that. And going on that journey for yourself to really learn from others. So there's the mentor, always think of Star Wars. The mentor teaches you something. You have to go on some journey of discovery. You go into the land of the unknown. Yeah. You go through turmoil and difficulty, and then you ultimately like absorb the lessons that the master was trying to teach you. That moment where Luke turns off his radar device to take the shot on the Death Star. And then the mentor disappears and you come back because you've learned what you need to learn. You've discovered what you need to discover. And then you come back to the group and you teach. So that is the journey every human being goes on or should go on. In fact, the vast majority of people don't go on that journey. But that's a journey of self-discovery, of learning how to take control of your own life, learning how to execute at the highest level, and then bringing what you've learned to other people, right? So that is the journey, the hero's journey. Now, what is utterly fascinating, that is such the physics of the human experience, the baseline, there's nothing lower than that. That's why it's called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. It is across cultures, long before they were communicating and interconnected. It's the same story that they all told. Yeah. Totally universal. They were just telling that story over and over and over because that's how people take control of their own life. And that's why Joseph Campbell lamented stunted adolescence, where there's no ritual, there's nothing that's like a threshold that you cross and go from being a child, being an adult. And he said, so you get this where people are perpetually in that zone where they never begin that journey. They never go out into the metaphorical woods and have to discover themselves and have to go through something fucking hard. Yeah. And by the way, that's one of the coolest things about the Harry Potter mythology is fucking people die, right? So it like gets dramatic and big, and so they go through like these real trials, have real consequences. And one of the stories that I want to tell at Impact Theory, and I honestly can't remember if this is real or if I made this shit up or if I made it loosely off of something that was real, but I have this vague memory being a kid growing up in the Pacific Northwest where like Native Americans are like a real thing. Yeah. That there were these Native kids that got arrested for doing something stupid. And they were like 14, if I remember right. And instead of going to juvenile hall, the tribe said, let us do our own tribal form of punishment, and we're literally going to put them in the woods for a year with no contact. And if I remember right, they took them to fucking Alaska and dropped them off in the wilderness. And I thought, those motherfuckers could get eaten by a bear. Yeah. But it was like, yes, that's the point. And I don't know if that's real, if I dreamed it, if it was like something sort of like that and I don't know. I want to tell that story though. That's going to be one of the comics, movies, TV shows or whatever that we do. That is so powerful to me. Have you read The Long Walk to Freedom?
No.
By Nelson Mandela? Mm-mm. Oh God, read it. You will love it. It's insanity. But by the way, he went through a circumcision ritual to go from boyhood to manhood. They straight with no anesthetic. In front of the entire tribe, homie. They sit you down, bucket ass naked, while everyone's watching. They grab your foreskin and with a sharp fucking knife, they just cut it off, and you have to yell out like this warrior's cry to show that like you're not daunted by the pain.
That's gnarly.
Dude, it made me go, yeah. So we got a little soft somewhere along the way. That was amazing. So anyway, that guy's whole story is phenomenal. The hero's journey is so fundamental and foundational to claiming your own power and becoming what you want to become. So sadly, I didn't get a circumcision ritual either. But you eventually, in some way, shape, or form in your life, have to go into the woods, literally or metaphorically, and like do some hard shit and come out the other side. You just have to. It's the only way that you get mentally tough.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is why I'm not a parent, because I don't know that I could put my kids through that. Like everyone else, I would want to mollycoddle them and make their life easy. Like, it's such an instinct. So.
Super interesting. I want to come back to another question I have about the hero's journey and Mastin's idea of movies, but I want to get into the questions from the audience here because we have a couple. Corinne Davis says, what do you think about functional life coaching? Do you think you can do some of that yourself without a coach?
Sure, of course. I've never had a coach, and his ideas really, really resonate with me. So in a, I suppose, a super clumsy way, I've gone on my own functional life coaching journey. What I like about his notion of functional life coaching is it is a direct reference to functional medicine, which is to identify the underlying cause of a symptom. So our healthcare system has become all about treating the symptom, which is amazing because when you have bacterial infections, like that's a pretty phenomenal way to treat everything like it is hyperacute, to go in and say, this infection is due to this bacteria, this medication will kill it. But that then translates to an over-focusing on just the symptoms and trying to create medicine that addresses that symptom. So the example that he gives in the episode is a statin to lower your cholesterol, right? Where, that's not what's creating that problem. You're not addressing it. Like, you're just trying to medically push down the cholesterol level rather than addressing the underlying cause. And so I started learning about functional medicine, trying to figure out Lisa's problem, and just seeing like how when you look at the body as a superorganism that has all these interconnected parts and pieces and like, quite frankly, competing systems, right? That you've got bacteria living inside of you that are competing for resources. You have bacteria fighting other bacteria competing for resources. You have viruses fighting against bacteria, bacteria fighting against viruses. Like, this is all the literal reality of being a human. And so until you understand everything as a whole, like you're never going to deal with the real issues. So his notion of you have to think of your mental space in that same way. What are the past traumas? What are your notions about success? Like all of that stuff, like it's all coming together to create the way that you're experiencing your life. And unless you identify all of that, and he really puts it into the context of trauma and healing past those things, clearing them out, as he calls it, it's a really smart way to look at it, to really look at your mentality as a whole that encompasses not only the things that I just mentioned, but also neurochemistry, neuroanatomy, like being realistic about what he calls the meat suit. I think that's super smart.
Yeah. I have a question for you. Do you, like, if you could go back and instead of, clumsily finding your way to the place that you are today in regards to your mindset, if you could go back and just like work with someone like Mastin Kipp to shortcut it, would you?
It's a great question, man. And here's, I don't know if I'm a fool or a genius. The truth is I probably wouldn't. And I say that because yesterday when I was downstairs, so we're about to reveal the set. We got a new set. It's fucking amazing. Super excited about it. But there's only 4 remotes and there's like 8 lights. And I'm trying to turn them off, and it would like turn one off and one on, the same button. And Lisa was like, oh, I think she sent us the instructions. You just need to read that. And I was like, no, I'll be able to figure it out. And so I'm like, click, 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 like, and on, off. What the fuck? And Lisa's literally watching me with amusement. Like, why won't you just read the directions? Like, You have the directions. And the truth is, I wasn't convinced that what she'd sent did anything more than explain that we have remotes to turn off the lights. So it's the doubt of whether or not the answer is really there, right? So there's always like that slight resistance. And then there's the power of once you figure it out, it is such a painful and frustrating process that it burns the concepts into your mind. So that, like, I'm so grateful for the deep emotional pain that I went through that have made these lessons so like visceral and concrete and ever present in my mind. Right. So, but at the same time, like, I'm a guy that I needed college, and that's going to seem super random. What I mean by that is I needed the structure of college to begin my journey of gaining discipline and all that. So I think that someone like Mastin is very, very powerful. And I think that there are people that will benefit so much from working with someone that can give them the structure, that can help them along the journey. And the truth is, I had a lot of mentors. I just didn't have anybody like that clear. Right. So it is, when I say that I wouldn't, it's only me reflecting on how powerful it was to fumble through everything, and just my natural inclinations to want to like figure it out rather than read the instruction manual. I'm conflicted in my own answer though, because I read so much. So I'm giving you the gut truth of my answer, but it doesn't even make sense to me. And I think this is why my own wife gets frustrated, because she's like, what you're doing right now makes absolutely no sense.
So in part, it might be like, what's your learning style, I think is where, because for me, I noticed that when I try new things, I want to, I just want to go out and try it. Like a sport or a game or something. I just want to go out and try it and figure it out. And then I might read some stuff later to kind of get the actual knowledge. But my wife, Nicole, she wants to be in a class. Like, she wants a teacher. She wants them to show her exactly the things so that she can learn exactly the moves and then just practice and get better. And for me, it was always like, just go out and do it, like surfing, just go out and do it. Like, I'll show you. And she's like, no, I need to be in a structured class with someone. So
that is a very good point.
Yeah. A couple more questions here. This one's from Hodaya Lavi. Mastin spoke about acknowledging when you feel emotional hardship. How does that go with you get more of what you focus on?
Acknowledging emotional hardship. I don't remember specifically Mastin's context around that. Do you?
I think it just relates back to, I think what Hodaya is referencing is just that you need to really dig through the layers of the emotional trauma in order to clear them. So you have to actually put in the work to
okay. That makes a lot of sense then. So yeah, so now you're focusing on it, right? You're focusing on the trauma and all that. And so now I want to make a really clear distinction. When you are going in and doing the hard work, the thing that you're really focusing on is, this is going to be beneficial. This is going to work. I'm going to get an outcome from this. If that's the thing that like you obsessively return to, as you, like, we had the earlier question, I think from Dan Bro, and he's talking about like, no, it was somebody else. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Hey, you're going deep. You're worried about the damage and danger or whatever that you're going to encounter as you do that. That isn't the thing that you're going to focus on. You certainly shouldn't be focusing on like, oh my God, I'm worried about what I'm going to find. I'm worried, right? You want to go into it saying over and over and over, like, this is going to yield a positive result. Like, this is going to work, and I need to be open, and I need to be willing to discover. So when I say you get what you focus on, I'm talking about that framework thing, not that you're going to have to spend time and attention on the trauma, and I get all that, and it won't be fun, by the way. But if you believe that, hey, this is really going to add up to something, that's what I'm talking about when I say you get what you focus on. If you're like, this is going to be fucking miserable and I'm so scared of what I'm going to learn, that becomes your focus. And now as you go deeper into that and remember these traumas, you can be like, this is why I didn't want to do it. Like, I remember I heard this story one time about this guy. He had like a wildly swollen lymph node in like his underarm or something. And that's like really fucking dangerous. And if you ever find that, you should immediately go to the doctor. And he didn't want to go. And his friends finally pressured him, and he went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, whoa, this could really be serious, right? It could be cancer of the lymph nodes or whatever. And he was like, we need to run some tests and come back in a week or whatever, and I'll let you know. And so the guy comes back and goes, I knew I shouldn't have gone. Dude, if you don't go, like, the problem doesn't go away because you're blind to it. Like, it only gets worse, and then one day you're dead. Way better to address it early, but it does mean that you have to face something. So that comes down to like, what's your mentality? If you get that diagnosis of, hey, this really could be serious, and you go, I knew I shouldn't have gone, like that's your focus, that's your frame of reference, it's all negative, it's all bad. If on the other hand you go, hey, finding it early, like now we can address it, I'm gonna fucking fight, I'm gonna come through on the other side, that's your focus, right? It is the exact same experience, but they have dramatically different frames of reference based on what you focus on.
Yeah, love that. And Mastin talks a lot in the episode about that decision-making process. How are you going to apply meaning to that event to have an empowering experience or one that's disempowering? Going back to the hero's journey and the idea of Mastin references superhero films, and he says his belief is that we're outsourcing our hero's journey to those films. I think sort of maybe as a form of escapism, but it runs a little contrary to what we're trying to do here at Impact Theory. So how do we, I guess, as a business, avoid that passive experience of just watching and not internalizing the lessons and then applying them to your life?
You don't.
Oh, tell me more.
So this is a truth of what we're about to go through. We are a filter. And our job is to find people who think like we think. And our job is to influence culture over generations. Our job is not at any one individual level to say, you're going to convert, you're going to think like we think, right? Like that just is not going to work. I wish it would. And there was a time in my life where I actually said out loud that there was no one that was beyond like really changing their mindset. Like, with enough energy, you can change anyone's mindset. I really believed that. And I believed it to the core of my being. And some of it was the arrogance of belief in myself. And some of it was just, I changed so dramatically. Why can't anybody change? And then I just really began to accept that is a losing proposition. It certainly doesn't scale. So even if it's true on a single individual person level, the lengths to which you may have to go to help that person when they don't want your help is crazy. And then reading Jeffrey Canada and him saying, I gave up on adults, and it became all about finding women who were either pregnant or about to become pregnant and focus them on learning what helps their children succeed, which his hypothesis was the number of positive words they hear before the age of 5. So it was like, wow, that's heartbreaking and terrifying. So I look at it as this is a multi-generational thing. If we succeed in the way that I want to succeed, it is because we will have influenced culture on such a subtle level that it is just baked into the culture that you get what you focus on. It's baked into the culture that you can do anything you set your mind to. And I mean, this stuff is real. So, and when I say that, I mean cultural beliefs, they vary from culture to culture. People talk about America being the land of opportunity largely because of the way that we look at failure. And when you hear that, it's like in other countries, like an entrepreneurial failure is a scarlet letter. An entrepreneurial failure, by the way, may come with massive financial problems where you are the same as your company. So when you fail, all that debt is just on you personally, which makes people really reticent to start a company. So not only do we have legislation in this company, but we also have just like cultural beliefs about, hey, fail fast, fail forward, like all that stuff. So it's like you can definitively influence culture by switching their beliefs. Now, part of this comes from who do we celebrate, right? We celebrate here in the US Elon Musk, Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, right? People that had tremendous failures, but they've also had massive successes. And they're the ones feeding into like, hey, this is how we should think. We all look at them and go, oh my God, they're amazing. And so we adopt their thinking. But that's all within certain niches of people when it's like expressible, but I think that it's deeply ingrained just in the culture as a whole. So I think that we can influence that if we stay at this long enough. People often credit like this really, when I read this, I was like, oh my God, this is actually going to fucking work. When I was reading the Disney biography and they talk about how Disney is credited partly with pulling the country out of the Great Depression with the Three Little Pigs. Because they wrote this song for the Three Little Pigs, which was like, imagine for a second, the theme song of the Three Little Pigs being like a #1 Billboard song for whatever, 3 months. It was that big, and people were whistling it, and the big bad wolf became the economy, and that's how everyone knew that's what they were talking about. So who's afraid of the big bad wolf became who's afraid of the bad economy, right? And so that whole thing is credited with helping people mentally get out of the Great Depression and get out of that, like, oh my God, like, woe is me, like, this is all terrible, and it's just all crumbling down around us. And he gave people a way to, like, get out. So very, very interesting. And so when Mastin talks about, like, I think that a lot of people are outsourcing their own hero's journey to that, I think people will. And I think a lot of people are going to watch our content and it will not help them in any way, shape, or form. And I'm just not worried about that. What I'm worried about are the people out there right now where this resonates. The people out there right now where we're going to give them the lexicon, the stories, the iconography, the characters that not only can they internalize themselves, but that they can pass on to their kids. And by the way, I don't remember their name, but there were just recently, like 2 days ago, somebody posted an Instagram photo with the 2 Star Wars mugs and relationship theory on the TV in the background. And I was like, oh my God, this in one image, they've summed up everything that we're trying to do. So first of all, obviously these are because they had like a stormtrooper painting on the wall as well. Like they're clearly of that world of media. They were watching relationship theory, not even like main ep impact theory. And
shout out to Marie Eve Gagne.
There we go. Yep. Marie Eve Gagne. Thank you so much. And that was like, that is exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about, where the Star Wars reinforces through self-signaling this ideology, right? So they're viewing themselves as Princess Leia and Han Solo. Those were the 2 mugs that they had. And when you steep yourself in that mythology and what those characters stand for, and, you know, I mean, Han, like, you think he abandons the Rebel Alliance, but he comes back, like, right when he's needed and, like, does what's right. And, you know, Princess Leia, who's, like, the freedom fighter. It's like all of that is present in those fucking mugs. And so that's how you really, like, get these ideas out into the culture. But obviously, not everyone is going to go beyond the entertainment. And that's fine.
Definitely. Well, cool. Well, we are out of time. I just want to remind everyone, today is the last day for the Refer a Friend contest. All you have to do is send people to the link, the YouTube video that we dropped in the comments, get them to subscribe, and then have them drop your name in the comments, and you could win a trip to Los Angeles from anywhere in the world. This is international. To hang out with Tom for the day, get your questions answered, hang out with the team, talk to us, and we want to have you here. So
indeed,
get into the contest.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. These are always a lot of fun. Go refer a friend, and if you haven't already yourself, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care.